My sister destroyed my relationship because she couldn't have her one true love, so I made her watch him fall for me instead. My younger sister Chloe has been using the same excuse since she turned 21. She can't have her one true love, so she's entitled to destroy everyone else's happiness. And I don't mean that in the cute, she's still hung up on her ex kind of way. I mean it like if you're genuinely happy, she'll find a way to make you absolutely miserable, then blame it all on her tragic love story. The one true love? Some guy named Blake she met at a fraternity party 4 years ago at Ohio State. They hooked up once at a Phi Delta Theta mixer, he never called back, and somehow that became her origin story for being a complete nightmare to everyone around her. It started with her best friend since kindergarten, Tiffany. One weekend, Chloe crashed at Tiffany's apartment in Columbus, and by Monday morning, Tiffany's boyfriend was sending Chloe good morning texts with little heart emojis. When Tiffany found them together in her own bed, the bed she'd bought with her Target credit card, Chloe actually had the audacity to say, "You don't understand what it's like to lose your soulmate, Tiff." Tiffany never spoke to her again. Blocked her on everything. Even switched to a different Starbucks location to avoid running into her. Then came our cousin Ashley's engagement party last fall. Chloe showed up wearing a white dress that cost more than my monthly rent, a designer number she'd somehow convinced Dad to buy for her emotional healing journey. She got wine drunk on the good stuff, cornered the groom in the bathroom of the country club, and according to him later, kept whispering how he reminded her of someone very special, while trying to kiss his neck. Thank God Brandon had enough sense to push her off and immediately tell Ashley everything. But did Chloe feel remorse? Hell no. She cried to our parents about how seeing happy couples triggered her abandonment trauma. Mom actually bought her a weekend spa retreat in Napa to help her process her feelings. That's when I knew I was dealing with a master manipulator who'd weaponized one random hookup into a lifetime excuse for ruining other people's lives. By the time I started dating Jake Thompson, a sweet accounting manager I'd met at my friend's housewarming party, I thought I knew exactly how to handle the Chloe situation. I kept him completely away from family dinners, deleted Chloe from all my social media accounts, and told him my sister was going through some personal stuff and needed space for meeting new people. For nearly 2 years, it actually worked. Jake and I built something real together, lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and coffee, hiking trails around Austin, Netflix binges where we'd fall asleep tangled up on his couch. He proposed last spring during a weekend trip to his family's lake house in East Texas, with the most beautiful vintage ring he'd found at an estate sale. We planned a small ceremony for October, nothing fancy, just us and our closest friends at a little chapel outside the city. I thought I'd finally outsmarted my sister's destructive patterns. Then I made one catastrophic mistake. I mentioned the engagement at Mom's birthday dinner in July. Chloe's eyes lit up like Christmas morning when she heard the news. "Oh my God, Hannah. I'm so incredibly happy for you," she squealed, pulling me into what felt like the fakest hug in human history. "When do I finally get to meet this amazing guy?" I should have known right then that I was about to lose everything I'd worked so hard to protect. A week after Mom's birthday dinner, Jake came home from work laughing, which should have been my first red flag. He never laughed about his phone. "Babe, you'll never believe this," he said, scrolling through his Instagram DMs while loosening his tie. "Your sister found me on here with some fake account. Look at these messages, they're honestly pretty desperate." We sat on his gray sectional couch, the one we'd picked out together at West Elm, and read through Chloe's digital assault. The fake account was called Austin Yoga Girl 22, with stolen photos of some random blonde influencer doing warrior poses. Her messages started innocent enough. "Hey. I think we have mutual friends through Hannah. Small world. Smiling face with smiling eyes. I love your hiking photos, Zilker Park is my absolute favorite spot too. This might sound weird, but I feel like we'd really click. Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" Jake was genuinely amused by her transparency. "She's not exactly subtle, is she?" he chuckled, showing me a particularly thirsty message about how she'd love to hear about his CrossFit routine sometime. "Trust me, subtle isn't in her vocabulary," I said, trying to keep my voice light even though my stomach was churning. "Just block her, okay? She's been acting really weird since the engagement." "Of course," Jake said, already hitting the block button. "She seems pretty unstable, honestly. Good thing you kept me away from family stuff." He kissed my forehead and went to shower, completely unaware that he just poked a sleeping bear with a very long memory and absolutely no moral boundaries. For the next 2 weeks, I convinced myself that blocking her would be enough. Chloe had always been persistent, but she'd never pushed past a direct rejection before. Maybe the fake Instagram account was just her testing the waters. Maybe she'd gotten it out of her system. I was so incredibly wrong. 3 weeks before our wedding, I came down with the worst flu of my adult life. Fever, chills, the whole miserable package. Jake was supposed to spend the day at his brother's bachelor golf tournament in Round Rock. Some cousin was getting married the following month. I was planning to stay in bed with soup and bad reality TV until I felt human again. That's when my friend Stephanie texted me around 2 in the afternoon. "Girl, come over when you're feeling better. I'm at my new place near Riverside." I knew Stephanie had just moved to an apartment complex about 10 minutes from where Chloe lived, but I didn't think much of it until she sent a follow-up text that made my blood run cold. "Wait, isn't that your sister's building across the street? I swear I just saw Jake's white Tesla in the visitor parking." My hands started shaking, and it wasn't from the fever. Jake drove a white Tesla Model 3 that he was ridiculously proud of. He'd spent weeks researching electric vehicles and talking my ear off about environmental responsibility. There was no innocent explanation for why his car would be at Chloe's apartment complex when he was supposed to be golfing an hour away. I threw on the first clothes I could find, yoga pants and one of Jake's UT hoodies, and drove across town with a 101-degree fever, my vision slightly blurry from the medication I'd been taking. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every turn brought me closer to confirming my worst suspicions. Chloe had given me a spare key to her apartment for emergencies when she first moved in. She'd made this big speech about how sisters should always be there for each other, how family meant never being locked out in a crisis. I guess this qualified as an emergency, just not the kind she'd had in mind. I used Chloe's spare key with hands that were shaking from both fever and fury. The apartment was quiet except for the low murmur of voices coming from her living room. I kicked off my shoes and crept toward the sound, every step confirming what I already knew but desperately hoped wasn't true. They were on her cream-colored sectional, the one she'd bought after seeing mine and Jake's, except hers cost twice as much because it was real Italian leather. Chloe's head was resting in Jake's lap, his fingers running through her dark hair in the exact same way he used to touch mine during our Sunday morning coffee rituals. Both of them were half-dressed, Jake in his golf polo with his pants unbuttoned, Chloe wearing nothing but his tournament t-shirt and her underwear. The sight hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some spontaneous moment of weakness, this was intimate, comfortable, like they'd done this before. When Chloe looked up and saw me standing in her doorway, those fake tears were already forming in her eyes before she even opened her mouth. She'd perfected this look over the years, the trembling lower lip, the wide-eyed innocence, the slight shoulder shake that made her seem vulnerable instead of manipulative. "Hannah, oh my God, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking in all the right places. "I never meant for this to happen. It's just, he reminds me so much of Blake and I." "Get the hell away from my fiancé," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the rage coursing through my veins. Jake finally looked up at me, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, guilt, and then something that looked almost like relief. Like he'd been waiting for this moment to arrive, so he wouldn't have to carry the secret anymore. "Hannah, listen, I can explain," he started, but I was already backing toward the door. "Don't," I said. "Just don't." I drove home in a fever-induced haze, my phone buzzing constantly with calls from both of them. Jake tried the "it just happened" excuse. Chloe went with her signature, "you don't understand my pain" defense. Neither of them seemed to grasp that I was past the point of caring about their explanations. The wedding was supposed to be in 3 weeks. I'd already paid for the venue, the photographer, the flowers. My dress was hanging in my closet with the tags still on. Our families had booked flights and hotel rooms. All of it was over, destroyed by my sister's pathological need to take everything that made me happy. But as I sat on my bathroom floor that night, running a fever and crying until my chest ached, something shifted in my brain. The grief started transforming into something much more dangerous, cold, calculated anger. Chloe had spent 4 years using Blake as an excuse to ruin other people's lives. She destroyed friendships, sabotaged relationships, and manipulated our parents into enabling her behavior. She'd convinced everyone that she was the victim of some great romantic tragedy when the truth was much simpler. She was a selfish person who couldn't stand to see others happy. But here's the thing about using someone as your one true love excuse for years, you leave a digital trail. And I'd been following Blake Morrison on Instagram for the past 3 years. We had mutual friends from college, the occasional like on each other's posts, but we'd never actually talked. He lived about 3 hours away in Dallas, worked as a physical therapist, and posted adorable videos of his golden retriever named Buster doing tricks in his backyard. Blake seemed like a genuinely nice guy who had no idea he'd been starring in my sister's victim narrative for the past 4 years. That's when I decided Chloe was about to learn what losing actually felt like. I spent 2 days crafting the perfect message to Blake. It couldn't sound crazy or vindictive, even though I was feeling both. It had to seem casual, almost accidental, like I was just reaching out to clear up some confusion. Finally, I settled on something simple. Hey Blake. This is probably weird, but my sister Chloe had a thing for you back in college and just destroyed my wedding. Want to help me teach her what real consequences look like? I hit send before I could second guess myself. He responded in 12 minutes. Chloe? The girl who showed up at my mom's house last month claiming to be my girlfriend. My jaw dropped. I called him immediately. She did what? I asked, not even bothering with pleasantries. Blake's voice was warm but tired, like he'd been dealing with the situation for longer than I realized. Yeah, she drove up to Dallas, somehow found my parents' address, and introduced herself to my mom as my girlfriend. Said she was going to be her daughter-in-law and wanted to plan family dinners together. You're kidding. I wish I was. My poor mom spent an hour showing her photo albums and asking about wedding plans before she called me at work, confused about why I'd never mentioned having a serious girlfriend. That's when I had to file a restraining order. Wait, you have a restraining order against Chloe? Had to. She'd been showing up at my gym, my physical therapy clinic, even followed me to my brother's kids' soccer games. The girlfriend thing with my mom was the final straw. The cops said she violated it by going to my hometown, but apparently she told them it was a misunderstanding, and got off with a warning. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. Chloe hadn't just been casually obsessed with Blake, she'd been full-on stalking him for years while using their one-night stand as justification for ruining everyone else's relationships. I'm so sorry, I said. I had no idea it had gotten that bad. Not your fault. But I have to ask, how exactly did she destroy your wedding? I told him everything, the pattern of sabotage, Jake on her couch, the years of manipulation disguised as romantic trauma. Blake listened without interrupting, occasionally making disgusted sounds at the worst parts. That's genuinely sociopathic, he said when I finished. Using our hookup to justify sleeping with your sister's fiancé? That's not heartbreak, that's just being a terrible person. Exactly. And she's been getting away with it for years because everyone feels sorry for her tragic love story. Well, Blake said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, maybe it's time someone wrote her a different ending to that story. We texted back and forth for the next few days, sharing our respective Chloe horror stories. He told me about the time she'd sent his mom flowers on Mother's Day from Blake's girlfriend. I told him about cousin Ashley's engagement party and the bathroom incident. Each story was worse than the last. By the end of the week, Blake suggested we meet in person. If we're going to mess with her head, he said, we might as well have some fun doing it. We met for coffee at a little place in downtown Austin the following Saturday. I was nervous. What if he was weird in person? What if this whole plan was stupid and vindictive and I was just as bad as Chloe? But Blake turned out to be exactly what his Instagram suggested, genuinely charming, tall with an easy smile, and surprisingly thoughtful. He remembered my coffee order from our text conversations and brought printed photos of Buster to show me, which was both sweet and slightly ridiculous. Okay, he said, sliding into the booth across from me, let's talk strategy. The plan we developed was beautifully subtle. Instead of posting obvious couple photos that would immediately scream revenge plot, we decided to plant breadcrumbs that would slowly drive Chloe insane with curiosity and jealousy. It started with Blake's golden retriever, Buster. I posted a photo of myself at the dog park near my apartment with a golden retriever's tail barely visible in the corner of the frame. The caption was innocent enough, Sunday vibes at Zilker Park Sun, but anyone who followed Blake's Instagram would recognize Buster's distinctive fluffy tail and his favorite tennis ball. Next came the physical therapy book. Blake lent me his copy of Movement Patterns and Pain Management, completely boring to most people, but the exact textbook he'd posted about using for his continuing education credits. I photographed it artfully arranged on my coffee table next to my morning latte, with the caption Sunday Study Session Hot Beverage Books. The third breadcrumb was Blake's watch, a distinctive vintage Rolex his grandfather had given him, and something he wore in half his Instagram posts. I took a mirror selfie in my bathroom where you could just barely see the watch face on the edge of the frame, like someone had left it on my counter. Never his face, never us together, but just enough specific details to make someone spiral if they were paying attention. And if there was one thing I knew about Chloe, it was that she studied social media posts like they were archaeological artifacts. The response was immediate and intense. My phone started ringing at 6:47 a.m. the day after I posted the mirror selfie. Chloe called 47 times that first day, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails that escalated from confused, "Hannah, I saw your Instagram and I'm just wondering," to accusatory, "I know what you're doing and this is so messed up," to full-blown hysteric, "You don't understand what you're doing to me." The text messages were even better. Paragraph after paragraph about sisterly bonds, about betrayal, about how I didn't understand what true love meant, and was just trying to hurt her during her healing journey. I responded exactly once, "Now you know how it feels." Meanwhile, Blake and I kept meeting for coffee, and then lunch, and then actual dinner dates. What had started as a revenge plot was turning into something unexpectedly real. He was funny and kind, listened when I vented about work stress, and had this way of making me laugh until my stomach hurt. "You know," he said one evening as we walked around Lady Bird Lake, "I'm starting to think your sister did us both a favor." "How do you figure?" "Well, if she hadn't been so crazy, we never would have started talking. And if she hadn't destroyed your wedding, you'd still be engaged to that cheating asshole instead of having dinner with me." He had a point. The wedding that never happened would have been that weekend. Instead, I was falling for someone who actually deserved my time, while Chloe slowly lost her mind trying to figure out if I was really dating her one true love, or just messing with her. But the best part was still coming. Because Blake had an idea that would make everything absolutely perfect. "Christmas dinner at your parents' house," he said with a grin that was definitely mischievous. "How do you think Chloe would handle meeting me in person?" Christmas dinner at my parents' house is usually a peaceful affair, Mom's famous honey ham, Dad's terrible jokes, and everyone pretending Chloe's dramatic outbursts are just holiday stress. This year, I decided to shake things up. "I'm bringing someone," I told Mom during our weekly phone call in early December. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. Is this someone new? I know things with Jake were." She trailed off diplomatically. "His name is Blake. We've been seeing each other for a few months now, and it's gotten pretty serious." I could practically hear Mom's excitement through the phone. She'd been worried about me ever since the wedding fell apart, constantly asking if I was eating enough and suggesting I try her yoga class to work through the emotional trauma. What I didn't tell her was that Chloe had been texting our entire extended family for weeks, trying to figure out if I was actually dating Blake Morrison or just having some kind of breakdown and posting cryptic Instagram photos for attention. Blake drove down from Dallas on Christmas Eve, and we spent the morning wrapping presents and preparing for what we both knew would be an absolutely explosive dinner. He was surprisingly calm about the whole thing. "I've been dealing with your sister's crazy for years," he reminded me as we pulled into my parents' driveway. "At least now I have backup." Chloe's car was already there, her white BMW with a custom license plate that read Blessed One, which meant she'd probably been at the house since morning, helping Mom cook and undoubtedly pumping her for information about my mysterious new boyfriend. We walked in through the front door, Blake carrying a bottle of wine and a gift bag, looking like the perfect gentleman caller. Mom rushed over immediately, wiping her hands on her Christmas apron. "You must be Blake. I'm so excited to finally meet you." And that's when Chloe walked out of the kitchen. I've never seen someone's face cycle through so many emotions in such a short time. Confusion, recognition, absolute horror, and then pure rage. She was holding a casserole dish, and for a moment I thought she might actually throw it. "Blake?" she whispered, like she was seeing a ghost. "Hey Chloe," Blake said casually, like they were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. "Good to see you again." The casserole dish slipped from her hands and shattered on Mom's hardwood floor, green bean pieces scattering everywhere. "Oh my God," Mom said, rushing to clean up the mess. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart, these things happen." But Chloe wasn't worried about the casserole. She was staring at Blake like he'd personally risen from the dead to ruin her Christmas, which honestly wasn't that far from the truth. "This isn't happening," she said, her voice getting higher and more hysterical with each word. "This can't be happening. Hannah, what did you do?" I fell in love, I said simply, taking Blake's hand. You know, that thing you've been claiming to understand for the past 4 years? Chloe's face went white, then red, then an alarming shade of purple. She looked between Blake and me like she was trying to solve a complex math problem, her brain clearly unable to process how her victim narrative had suddenly become my love story. You planned this, she accused. You did this on purpose to hurt me. Actually, Blake said, his voice still perfectly calm, you did this when you decided to stalk me for 4 years and use our one-night stand to justify being terrible to everyone around you. That's when Chloe completely lost it. What happened next will go down in family history as the great Christmas meltdown of 2023. Chloe started screaming, not crying, not yelling, but full-on shrieking like someone was physically attacking her. She was sobbing about stolen soulmates, about sisterly betrayal, about how I'd destroyed her one chance at happiness. Dad came running from the living room where he'd been watching football. What in the world is going on? She stole him. Chloe wailed, pointing at Blake like he was evidence in a murder trial. That's M.Y. Blake. That's the love of my life. She did this to hurt me. Chloe, Mom said gently, honey, I think you need to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. She knew. She knew how much he meant to me and she took him anyway. Blake, to his credit, remained incredibly composed throughout this entire breakdown. He just stood there holding my hand while my sister had what can only be described as a complete psychotic break in my parents' dining room. Chloe, he said finally, his voice firm but not unkind, we hooked up once 4 years ago. Once. I never called you back because I wasn't interested. I filed a restraining order because you've been stalking me ever since. We were never together. We were never going to be together. And Hannah didn't steal anything because there was nothing to steal. This somehow made her even more hysterical. She locked herself in the downstairs bathroom for 3 hours, alternating between sobbing loudly and screaming about how nobody understood true love, and how we'd all betrayed her during her healing journey. Mom kept knocking on the door, offering food and tea and asking if she needed anything. Dad muttered about too much drama for Christmas, and went back to his football game. Blake and I ate dinner with my parents and actually had a lovely time talking about his work and my job and normal, healthy relationship things. Around 9 o'clock, Chloe finally emerged from the bathroom, her makeup completely destroyed and her hair looking like she'd been through a tornado. She'd clearly been having some kind of realization in there because her whole demeanor had shifted from hysterical to coldly furious. Fine, she said, looking directly at me. You want him? You can have him. But don't come crying to me when he breaks your heart just like he broke mine. He never broke your heart, I said quietly. You broke your own heart by building a fantasy around someone who was never yours. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, but not before delivering one final dramatic exit line, you'll see. You'll see what kind of person he really is. Mom followed her out, trying to convince her to stay, but Chloe was already backing out of the driveway like she was escaping a crime scene. Well, Blake said once the chaos had settled, that went better than expected. Better. I stared at him. She literally had a nervous breakdown. Yeah, but she left. Usually she doubles down and makes everyone else miserable for hours. 6 months later, Blake and I are still together, and it's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. We took a weekend trip to his family's cabin in East Texas, the same cabin where Chloe had apparently shown up uninvited 2 years ago, trying to surprise him for his birthday. We sent her a postcard. These days, Chloe posts cryptic Instagram quotes about surviving betrayal and learning who your real family is. She started going to therapy, which is honestly the best possible outcome for everyone involved. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's just living a genuinely happy life with someone who actually chooses to be there. And Blake? He says meeting me was worth 4 years of crazy stalker drama. Though he did make me promise that if I ever have a breakdown and start showing up at his mom's house uninvited, he's changing his phone number and moving to a different state. Fair enough.